Hey everyone, and welcome back to AP Art History Home Edition. Today we're going to be covering pop art, the most fun of all the art movements. Definitely more fun than German Expressionism, right? Let's get right into it. After World War II, in the late 1950s, America had an economic breakthrough. There was a manufacturing boom which led to a rise in mass media and advertising. This is Mad Men times. It was ads, ads, ads. The focus on mass media led to a reverence of it. Artists felt that it was difficult to distinguish between the trivial and the important, so mass media began fusing with traditional fine art and the lines became blurred. A few artists' work led to the pop art movement as we know it. Italian artist Edoardo Paolozzi is believed to have made one of the very first pop art collages as far back as 1947, 13 years prior to Andy Warhol's first pop art. British pop artist Richard Hamilton created this collage that was used as advertisements for a gallery show. Artists Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg played around with the concepts of mundanity and fame. Overall, there grew a specific fascination with American culture and mass media. Richard Hamilton, the guy who created the collage, also developed criteria for pop art. To be considered a work of pop art, it would need to portray the popular, obviously, or items designed for mass consumption. It needed to be expendable or easily forgotten, and it needed to be mass-produced. It should also promote the gimmicky, the glamorous, and the cult of the celebrity. The next artist on our list wished to fulfill all of those things and become a huge name in the fine art world. Andy Warhol was an established, successful fashion illustrator by the time he hit his 30s, but he desperately wished to enter the fine art world. He very much admired the artists who had become household names, like Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg specifically. Here's some of Warhol's early work. His fashion illustration background is clearly evident, but his work of simple illustrations made very little impact. It wasn't until 1962 that he was given the idea to focus on products that were so present in people's lives they were going unnoticed. The idea to combine the high art or fine art with low products to both glorify and criticize the consumption habits of Americans. This concept eventually led to his famous Campbell's soup cans composition and his work with all other mass-marketed items. Artists outside of the pop art movement and art critics alike saw this embracing of the mainstream as a bit of a betrayal. Fine art is usually seen as the antithesis to things like marketing and advertisement, and this movement is also a specific response to abstract expressionism, which was a very personal artistic movement to the artists involved. Remember, the pendulum swings the other way and gives us pop art, a very cool and distanced type of art that is really not personal at all. Warhol utilized a technique called screen printing, which is a form of printmaking. He could create an image, then screen print multiples of the image with slight variations. The work on our list utilizes the same technique. This technique allowed Warhol to work quickly, efficiently, large scale, and in multiples. He worked with other people, hiring many assistants, and these collaborations were at the heart of most of his work. His studio was essentially set up as an art factory, which he dubbed, of course, the Factory. His popularity grew immensely. He took a number of more bohemian individuals like models, socialites, drag queens, and others under his wing, filmed them, and dubbed them his Warhol superstars. These were people who appeared in his work and who he hung out with. The closest to Warhol, and likely the most famous, was model Edie Sedgwick. He shot a lot of movies in the studio, in the factory, featuring these individuals throughout this time too. These movies are very graphic, very sexual, and they feature a lot of drug use. His movies also featured people who are not a part of mainstream media, like gay and transgender individuals. He created opportunities for them to become more visible. And if you can't already tell, the Factory was most famous for its parties. It quickly became the place for artists and celebrities to hang out, which only boosted Warhol's own status as an artist celebrity. Warhol was fascinated by celebrities in Hollywood. But the Factory's parties couldn't last forever. In 1968, Warhol was shot in a murder attempt by a person who was involved at the Factory. She had written some scripts and participated in some movies, and she had stopped by to pick up a script for a play that she had dropped off, but she was turned away. She shot Andy Warhol in the chest, and he barely survived. His near-death experience had a profound impact on it, and he became much quieter throughout the 1970s. In the 1980s, though, he had a resurgence. He aligned himself with a bunch of up-and-coming young artists like Jean-Michel Basquiat, who's a graffiti artist later on our list, and Keith Haring. He went in for gallbladder surgery in the late 1980s, and that is when he died from complications. The work by Warhol on our list is one of his early ones. It debuted in his first solo show in New York City in 1962. It's called Marilyn Diptych and combines silkscreen on canvas with some oil and acrylic paint. You can see it's divided into two panels with colored portraits of Marilyn on one side and black and white portraits on the other, thus the name Diptych for two. This work features superstar Marilyn Monroe, who was a famous actress and sex symbol of the 1950s. Her personal life was what really interested people most, and it was a troubled one. She had a tumultuous relationship with baseball player Joe DiMaggio and the playwright Arthur Miller. She was also rumored to have had an affair with President John F. Kennedy. It was this gossip that people were really mostly interested in. And of course, when you're a celebrity of that caliber, you begin to feel isolated, angry, and depressed. And she struggled with addiction as well. She committed suicide in 1962. Warhol created this work after Monroe's suicide, and you can see it was dated to the same year, 1962. Warhol, yes, was created a memorial to Monroe, but more than that, he was commenting on the consequences of mass media. This intense spotlight on Monroe's life, the comments, the stories, the judgments, they weren't helpful as she was also struggling with addiction and depression. It only intensified her sense of isolation. We can see this with celebrities nowadays, too, in the unrelenting nature of gossip outlets and the paparazzi. His depiction of Monroe was exaggerated. Obviously, this wasn't her real skin color or hair color. It's all amplified, like the concept of her celebrity. The 25 Marilyns on the left are more garishly colored, representing the woman's public image, while the ones on the right are in black and white and kind of trail and fade off, representing possibly the woman inside who felt a little empty and depressed and who fades away from the public image, from the public eye. And it's in the nature of repetition that it causes desensitization. So the more you're exposed to something, the more normal it feels to us. And this is probably most applicable to us when it comes to something, this might sound a little dramatic, but to something like school shootings. So back in the very early 2000s, it was unheard of. And we fast forward now 20 years, and it's a commonplace thing that we have to prepare for and discuss each year. And it's to the point where I'm sure each year we have the same conversation about what to do. You might be rolling your eyes a little, the same conversation over and over and over again. It's a serious topic. The media portrayal of school shootings has really left us a bit desensitized to it, and in some ways to the topic itself. It's really not that shocking to us anymore. We see this desensitization depicted in Warhol's work. If this were just one portrait of Monroe, it would be different. Yet he created 50 Marilyns here. The media's covering of her suicide and everyone's fascination with the gossip in her life left people desensitized to the notion that she was a human. Her story ends up being that she was a martyr to the media. So there you have Warhol's Marilyn Diptych in the beginning of pop art. You actually have one more work of pop art to cover, and it's by artist Claes Oldenburg, who creates these really fun public sculptures. So you're going to cover that one on your own. And if you have any questions about pop art or Warhol or Claes Oldenburg, let me know through Google Classroom or email. I am here to help.